If you want to study any aspect of chess, Lichess Studies may be all that you need. This well-designed workspace is there to help you learn and improve, and it's free to use. In this video, we will set up and navigate a study page from scratch before using tools like the Opening Explorer, the Games Database, and Analysis Engine to develop an opening repertoire. And by the end, we should have a structured approach to learning that can grow with us throughout our chess journey. On lichess.org, let's go to the Learn Study page. We're met with all of these cool studies that we could go and learn from, but we looked at this and the menu here on the left in my previous video, which was an overview of the website as a whole. So if you haven't seen that, then please do go and check it out. For now, we're going to focus on creating a new study using the green plus icon in the top right-hand corner. We're met with the Create Study panel where we can set some options. First of all, we can give it a flair. Last time we chose the alien face here because he was first. So this time let's choose our second alien monster friend. And then we can give our study a name. And I'm going to choose My Opening Study. You can obviously call your study whatever you like. And it's worth pointing out that you don't have to use this page just to study openings. It can also be used for end games, middle games, tactics, or anything that you wish. I just want to focus on creating an opening study for this video. Then we can set the visibility. If it's set to public, that means anyone with the link can view it. If it's unlisted, then they have to have the link first. If it's invite only, then it's a private study and I have to specifically invite people via their Lichess usernames. And I'm going to leave it as this because I want this as a study just for me to learn my openings. You can then set various permissions for functions within the study page, like the chat function, the computer analysis, the opening explorer and table base, allowing cloning, i.e. copying of the study, and sharing and exporting it. The options for this are to allow no one to do this, just yourself, other contributors, i.e. editors of the study, other members, or anyone at all. And because this is a private study just for me, I'm going to set all of these to only me, just to keep control. You've then got the Enable Sync option. Keep everyone on the same position means that if multiple people are looking at this study at any one time, they will all see the same thing. And if I make a move in my window, they will see it in theirs. Let people browse freely allows them to move independently throughout the study contents. And even though this is a private study just for me, I'm going to select this one because I may want to work with this across two separate windows, and this just allows me to keep flexibility. I can then choose to pin a study comment underneath the board if I want, but I generally leave this as none. And I can change all of these settings later on, as we shall see, but for now, let's hit Start. We then have to set up the first chapter of the study, so we can give it a name. I'll leave it as chapter 1 for now, and we'll change that in a moment. And then we can set the start position. Empty means the initial start position for a game of chess. And as you can see under variant, we're looking at the standard chess variant, although I could choose any other one of these variants listed here. I could also use the board editor to set up a bespoke position, either by moving the pieces, or I could clear the board and drag pieces on like this, or I could click the piece and place it wherever I want it. I can also set whose side it is to play and castling rights, en passant rights, etc. I could also pull in a game via a link to, say, a Lichess game that I've played, for example, or if I've got an FEN code, I could use that to set the start position, or I could even import a PGN of either one game or multiple games of either my own or someone else, Grandmaster games, etc., by pasting them in the box here or browsing for a file. But for now, let's stick with the initial start position and choose empty. You can then set the orientation for either the white or the black pieces, and we're going to focus on white for this video. And then you set the analysis mode. Normal analysis is what we're going to use for this video, so we'll see that as we go. But you could also have practice with computer, which means just that, practicing against the computer. You could have hide next moves, which is useful if you want to play, say, guess the move against a Grandmaster game that you've imported via a PGN, for example. Well, there's also interactive lesson. And this means that you can set up a move-by-move curriculum for other people to follow. So say you want to teach a particular opening, you could set it up so it says, play the move E4. They play the move on the board, it moves on to the next step, black's response, now you play this or that, etc. So have a play around with that one on your own. And there are some really cool interactive lesson studies that you could learn openings from, for example, in Lichess already. Let's set normal analysis for this study. And then we go create chapter. Here is our study. Let's start in the top left-hand corner where we're in the chapters panel. And here is our first chapter that we've set up. If I want to change any of the details of this, I can go to the cog icon and go to the edit chapter panel, where I can change its name, the board orientation, the analysis mode. I can add a pinned chapter comment or clear annotations, clear variations, and delete the chapter from here if I like. I can add a new chapter by going to the blue plus icon here and setting up a chapter in just the same way as we've already seen. I can have up to 64 chapters for any given Lichess study. I kind of wish you could have as many as you wanted, but I can see why they've done it. It's because it's the number of squares on the chessboard, so fair enough. Next to that is the members panel, and here you can see all members of the study listed. At the moment it's just me, but I can add more members by going to the plus icon here and searching for their Lichess username, and I can set their permissions, whether they're a contributor or a standard member. Next to that is the search function, so I can look for any content I like within the study. And then the 3 lines here gives you the edit study panel, where we can reset anything that we already looked at, like the permissions and visibility, etc. Underneath that is a chat room, so I can toggle this on to type messages to anyone who can see it. And then there's a voice chat function. This is really useful if you're working with a coach or a student or a friend to talk over Lichess about the positions that you're looking at. And at the bottom, slightly obscured by my head and chair, is a list of all usernames of people who are currently looking at the study. So let's say this was a public study. This would be people who are non-members, anyone who is viewing it. In the middle is the chessboard, where I can make moves, I can draw arrows, I can highlight squares, I can change the color of these using the Control and Alt keys. So Control gives me red, Alt gives me blue, and then both together gives me yellow. And there's also a resized board handle here, where I can make it smaller or bigger. As you can see, by making the move E4, it started to build my notation here in this panel on the right. And as I continue to add moves, that notation grows along with me. If I add alternative moves, it starts to build variation trees. If I right click on this move here, it gives me a menu. So I could promote the variation or make it the main line, like so. Or I can add a comment or an annotation, and we'll look at doing that later on. I can copy the PGN up until that point for that variation only, or I can delete the move from here. And the same is true if I right click on a move in the main line, I get a similar menu with the addition of this forced variation option. This is really useful if you've got a lot of moves or a lot of variations in your chapter. You can tidy it up by creating kind of separated main lines. So if I click this, this now becomes a line like this. If I add an alternative line, it builds it as a separate line underneath it. Also here on the right hand side, I can toggle the engine on and off. I can access the Opening Explorer and Games database via this book icon. And we're going to look at these quite a lot in this video, so we'll come back to those. I can then select this circular icon here to practice against the computer. So it's my turn. I make a move, it responds. I make a move, it responds. And I can train with the computer that way. I can then use these arrows to navigate through my moves, either all the way back to the start, or flick through the moves one at a time forwards or backwards, or go all the way to the end. I've then got these 3 lines here that brings up another menu. So I can flip the board. I can also use the keyboard shortcut F to do that. I can go to a board editor to change the position or set up a new one. And I can also practice against the computer from here. Then there's various notation display options. So inline notation puts it all in a row like this, as opposed to vertically. I can add disclosure buttons. So this will add expandable and contractible sections to my notation. So let's say instead of knight c6, I add the move knight f6. Here now I've got this little minus icon, and I can make that disappear and then make it reappear if I want. This again is really useful for keeping neat notation for your studies. I'm going to turn that one off for now. And then I can toggle on and off the move annotations. And you've got a computer analysis section. So I can toggle the computer on and off here as well. I can also add a best move arrow, so it shows me the best move in the position, and also piece maneuver arrows. And I can turn the eval bar on and off. I can't see it at the moment because I've got the engine switched off here. If I turn this on, there's the eval bar. I can go here to turn it off like this. Underneath that, I can set various visual motifs to see in any given position, such as undefended pieces, pinned pieces, or whether the king is checkable or not. This is really useful if you're studying a position and you want to try and understand it better with a little bit of help. And then there's a replay mode, so I can get the computer to play the moves either quickly. It's not that quick, but there it is. And I can also choose slow if I want it to go a lot slower. Along the bottom, there are then various other functions, starting with the record function. I have to have this switched on in order to save any moves that I make into my study. So if I turn this off and then make a couple of moves, let's say I play knight c3, knight f6, you can see it's put these moves in my notation here. If I go out of my study and then come back in, go to my studies here, now you can see the moves haven't saved. So I have to turn the record function on in order to do that. I've then got this tag tab here that shows me the name of the study and the chapter that I'm in and how many likes it has. I could then go to the comments tab and add a comment to any given move. So let's say I want to add a comment to the move knight c6 here. I can go to this tab here and just type, say, good move, for example. If I want to delete it, I just highlight it and delete it. And if I wanted to right click and do that, then you'll see that it just takes us down to this box anyway. So it's just the same thing, just a different way of navigating it. Next to that is the annotations tab, so I can add all of these different annotations to my move. So again, we want to give knight c6 a good move, so we'll select that one, and we can see that it shows up here as a graphic next to the move on the board, and also here in the notation. If I toggle the move annotations off, it disappears from the board, but it stays present here. And you can add all kinds of different annotations, such as, mistake, blunder, etc., zugzwang, whether white is better or winning or black is winning, novelties, all this kind of list. They've all got keyboard shortcuts. So good move is 1, mistake is 2, 3 is brilliant move, etc. I'm not quite sure what they are further down the list, so you'd have to have a little play around with that yourself. The next tab is the engine analysis tab. So I can request a full server analysis of the game that's been played. And then there's a multi-windows tab that honestly I have never used, so you'd have to go and play around with that on your own. Then there's the share tab, and here I can share my study in all kinds of different ways. I can either clone it, that is create a copy of it directly into Lichess. I can download a PGN of the entire study or just of the chapter that I'm on. I can copy that chapter PGN or copy the raw PGN. I can also download a picture of the board or a GIF if I want to post on social media or something. I can copy the study URL to share it or the current chapter URL. I can even add the start position of the move I'm currently on. So you see it appends the URL here, so people will see it from the move to knight c6. Or I can even copy the FEN code and share the position that way. And then there's this little information icon here, which takes you to a walkthrough of the study page, so you can learn more about it directly from Lichess. Let's see all of this in action by developing a repertoire for the white pieces. I've chosen to focus on 1e4 against the Sicilian defense for this video, but the process we look at can be applied to any opening and for either color. There are so many options available for both colors in the Sicilian that it's a pretty vast opening to try and understand. But after e4, c5, let's just look at the main options for white. You could play knight f3 followed by d4, going for the open Sicilian, definitely the main lines. Or you could play something with, say, bishop b5, either the Rossolimo or the Moscow variation, depending on what black does. There's also, the move bishop c4 if you want to go for like a bolder attack here. You could also play bishop c4 straight away if you want to go for the bolder attack. Not meant to be the best opening, but it is an option. You could also play knight c3, going for a closed Sicilian with g3, or again, something with the bishop coming out on this diagonal. You could play something like knight c3 followed by f4, the Grand Prix attack. Or there's also f4 straight away, the McDonald. Then there's d4, going for a Smith-Morra gambit. You could play c3, the Alapin, or knight f3 followed by c3, the delayed Alapin. There's also sidelines like the wing gambit, or a3, or knight a3, or b3, the Snyder variation. There's absolutely loads of stuff at white's disposal. Let's say you don't know any of that stuff though. How do you use Lichess Studies to try and work out what you should play? Well, here we can open the database via this book icon and look at the Opening Explorer. We've now got two databases available at our disposal. The first is the Masters database, so this is players above a certain rating with a FIDE title. And then you've also got the Lichess database here, which is all players and all games played on Lichess. And you can decide which database is most relevant for you to use based on your rating level. You may find that using the Lichess database is better because it actually shows you the moves that you will face in your own games. I generally tend to stick with the Masters as a yardstick for my play, but for this video, we'll flick between the two of them and you can choose how you want to work. There's also this player tab here, This means you can search for a specific player username on Lichess, but I tend to find this is a bit laggy, so I usually avoid it. If we go on the Lichess tab, you can configure this further using the settings cog here. If I click on this, I can choose the time control that I want to look at. I can set, a rating range by clicking these on and off, and I can set the dates between which these games have been played as well, just to really configure it so I look at exactly what's applicable to me for my level. But as I say, we're going to stick with the masters for our main database, and here the settings are just to choose the date range for the games because everything else is configured for you. The opening explorer shows a list of moves. It shows the percentage of time that those moves are played in a game, the number of games that it's been played in, and then this little bar graph with the win percentage for white, the draw percentage, and the win percentage for black. And if we flick to the Lichess database, you'll see how this changes. There's a lot more wins for either colour and much less draws because this is everyone from beginners upwards, and the masters is more evenly distributed among the three results. And we can use the moves in these databases to help us understand what is played in these positions and make some decisions for our own repertoire. So for the Sicilian, according to the masters database, you can clearly see that knight f3 is the top move. It's played 83% of the time, so that's pretty high. And it's followed by moves like knight c3 and c3, and then everything underneath that, like d4 or d3, are definitely sidelines with only 1% down to kind of 0%. So if we were just going based on this information, I would say we'd probably opt to play knight f3. It's clearly the best move according to the masters. Let's look at how that differs with the Lichess database. Well, here you can see knight f3 is still the top move, but now it's only played 53% of the time. Knight c3 has built in popularity, and bishop c4 enters the list with 9% played. Looking at both of these, knight f3 is still the top choice according to both databases. So actually, let's make our choice accordingly, and let's choose knight f3 as our second move. Here, we now need to look at the different responses available for black, and there's a bit more of a split. According to the masters, d6 is the top move with 46%, followed by knight c6 with 27%, and then e3 with 23%. And there's also g6 with 2, and then it's all 1% and lower. So we can say that the top three moves here are definitely main tries for black. The percentages are a lot lower. There isn't just one clear winner. So we want to make sure that we look for a line against at least each of these three moves. So let's put them on the board. d6 would be the main line, and then knight c6 would be second, and then e6 like this. And I'll also include g6 because the hyper-accelerated dragon is a cool opening. I used to play it myself, so I want to have something prepared against that because I already know it. And also, actually, a6, I face this fairly regularly, the O'Kelly, so I know that already, so I'll also put this on the board. But that's as far as I'm going to take it. Let's just compare that list again with the Lichess database. Well, here you can see that knight c6 is now the most popular choice, followed by d6. But then you've also got e6, g6, and a6 in the list. So it's the same top five moves. So it's definitely worth having these in our study. And anything else that we will face, we can analyze and work out what to play against them as we go. Now we need to decide the direction we're going to take the game on our third move. Let's put d6 on the board as the main line. And here again, d4 is the clear favorite with the Masters database played 81% of the time, the Open Sicilian. The other main option is bishop b5 check, the Moscow, so that's worth consideration. But let's go with the Explorer in this case. Let's just check it against Lichess as well. Yep, d4 is still the top move there. 53% of the time, bishop c4 has gained in popularity, playing a similar development scheme as people might play against, say, the Italian against e5 instead of c5, for example. But d4 is still a clear winner, so that's what we're going to go for. Let's go for d4. So now we've followed this process using the Opening Explorer to suggest the moves that we want to add to our study, and using the percentage score of those moves to decide where we end a line. So let's have a look at the main line with e4, c5, knight f3, and then d6, d4, the Open Sicilian, and here you can see c takes d4 is played 96% of the time. So that's a really high number, so that goes on the board. We don't concern ourselves with anything else at this point. Knight takes d4 is played 96% of the time, so let's do that. Knight f6 is 100%, so that definitely goes on. Then knight c3 is 98% because black is attacking this pawn, so we have to defend it. let's develop a piece whilst doing so. And now we see a6 is the top move with 71%. That's because this is the Najdorf variation and the mainline Sicilian that you will face. However, if we go back, there's a couple of other options worth noting here. Knight c6 is the classical variation, so that can go on. You've also got g6, the dragon, very popular, so that can go on. And you've also got e6, which is the Scheveningen. So we'll put that on there because I know that is an opening that black could play, although it's not that popular. These days, you tend to get a Scheveningen structure after the move a6 and the Najdorf, but there we go. So now we've got those moves on the board, we need to continue the same process and add to these lines. Let's go back to our Najdorf example. And here you can see the top 3 moves have a clear delineation between their popularity. So there's the move bishop e3, there's the move bishop g5, and there's the move bishop to e2. And the percentages suddenly are not as high. It's not like 90%, 80% for the top move. I've got a choice here between which move I actually want to play. So this is where I would end this line for now, because I want to come back and actually look at some game examples to see what kind of plans and ideas exist that I might want to follow on each of these moves before deciding which way I want to take it. Let's do this process again as another example. This time we're going to go back and we're going to look at black's second move with knight to c6. Here we play d4. And again, we've got a top move, c takes d4 100%, so that goes on the board. Knight takes d4 100%. And then you've got the moves knight f6, 58%, but you could also have g6, the accelerated dragon, a very popular opening, so that needs to go on there. e5 as well, which says the Lowenthal variation. I believe this is also called the Kalashnikov, so that definitely needs to go on there. And e6 is played 6% of the time, so this goes into a Taimanov variation, so that can go on there. And everything else we will leave for now. If we start with e5, you can see here that the top moves continue to be high percentage numbers. So knight d to b5 is 98%, d6 is 99%, 83% for bishop g5 here, so let's put that on the board. 100% for a6, 97% for knight a3, 96% for b5, and here we've got a separation. So knight to d5 and bishop takes f6 are the top 2 moves, fairly evenly distributed. They may transpose into one another, but here is where I'd end my line, where I've got a choice from the white side, and I need to look at my plans and ideas to decide which move I want to adopt. If we look at the other line with 5d6, this is the classical variation. And here again, I've got a few options. I could play bishop g5, I could play bishop c4, and maybe even bishop e2. And even though bishop g5 is, a clear winner in terms of the percentage, it's 57% as opposed to 19 and 10% for the other 2 moves. 57% isn't a high enough number for me to just choose that move based on the Explorer. Now I need to go and look at my game examples. I followed that process and built my initial repertoire based on the main moves that I will face according to the opening Explorer. So you can see I've got a lot more moves now in my notation panel on the right. I've also started classifying things, so Sveshnikov, Accelerated Dragon, the names of the actual variations. This is useful to help me to start to understand the opening in the different ways that it can go, but also I can see where there's any transpositions. So 4e6 is the Taimanov here. Also, for knight c6 here is the Taimanov because they end up in the same position. I've also renamed my chapter to the name Index. That's because this will serve as a kind of contents chapter, if you like. I can navigate through to show me which lines I'm actually playing in my games and then point me in the right direction to other chapters that we will build and other resources like games that I might want to study. So this is my initial index chapter. I've also renamed the study as a whole. As you can see down here, it's now called Open Sicilian for White. I go into the 3 lines, changing it here, and I change the flare to a wolf face because, I like wolves. Now we have our first few moves in place, we can start to look deeper at plans and ideas. A great way to do this is to study master games. So let's see how some strong players actually play this opening. Let's use our line against the classical Sicilian to demonstrate this. So after e4, c5, knight f3, if I continue using the wheel on my mouse to flick through the moves, it will play the main line with d6. So instead, I want to look at the move knight c6, either by playing the move on the board or choosing it from the move list here. So knight c6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, and here we want to see when black plays d6. So according to the opening explorer, we had a couple of different options. We could play bishop g5 or bishop c4. There was also bishop e2, but we'll use these two moves for the example. Let's put bishop g5 on the board, and let's go and have a look at some games. So if we scroll down, I've now got a list of Grandmaster games here that I can go and study. I could look at something fairly recent like Carlsen Nakamura, which was from 2024, but this game was a draw. And actually, I'd like to look at games which white won because we're looking at this from the white side of the board. And I'd like to look at players that I actually really admire and want to emulate. Not that these aren't great players, but there's other names on this list that leap out at me more. For example, this game here, Garry Kasparov versus Vasily Ivanchuk. Two players that I really love and a great game for me to go and look at. It was a win for white. It was played in 1998, so relatively old now. Actually, games of this era are really good at showing plans and ideas. And although later games might be better developed in terms of their theory, this would be an excellent STEM game for me to study. If I click on it, I can view the game in a separate window, and we'll come back to that. I can cite the game, so after the move bishop g5, it adds the game information and a link to that game. I can delete this via the comments box down here, and using the little bin icon here. I can also insert the entire game after the move bishop g5. So this puts the entire game notation with a citation at the end and the link. Let's just delete that for now. And if I go back to the game, the only other option that was there was to close this screen window like this. But let's have a look at the game and try and look at the plans and ideas that Kasparov played. So let's go view and take a look. Ivanchuk played e6. Kasparov played queen d2, so forming a battery on this dark square diagonal. So that's one idea, allowing long castles. After Ivanchuk played a6, that's exactly what happens. And after bishop e7, Kasparov gets on with things and plays f4. He's being very Kasparov, very aggressive, and just throwing his pawns up the board on the king side. And, you know, whilst black king is still in the center, he might be relatively safe. You know, he might have some more problems if he castled over here. I'm not entirely sure. But this is very direct play and a plan that I quite like. After the move knight takes d4, queen takes d4, b5, trying to get on with counterplay over on the queen side. Bishop takes f6, so giving up the dark square bishop for the knight, because if the bishop recaptures, then this pawn will drop. So g takes f6, and then e5, moving forwards in the center, creating contact with two pawns. So if one of them was to push forward, you could potentially take the other one. This is very direct play from Kasparov and a plan that I quite like. The game carries on through to 35 moves. I could keep going and investigate it further, but in terms of plans and ideas from the opening, this is a good place to leave it. Let's go and compare that against the other move of bishop c4. So in this position, the move bishop c4, and again, let's go and find a game. And there's a few similar games here. For example, there's Kasparov versus Anand, so I could look at what Kasparov played again, but let's choose someone different. And actually, there's this game below that, Veselin Topalov versus Vladimir Kramnik. I like Topalov, he's another cool player, and it's always good to look at games where Kramnik loses. So I'm going to select this one. Let's go view and flick through the moves to see what the plans and ideas are. So queen to b6, knight takes c6, so exchanging these knights, b takes c6, and then castle short. So potentially a more positional attempt from Topalov, but we'll see. e6 to blunt this bishop like so. Queen e2, so interestingly forming the battery on the light square diagonal now. You move the light square bishop, not the dark squared one, so that makes sense. Knight d7, and then b3, opening up this pocket for the bishop to fianchetto. And actually this is quite nice too, because now you've got two bishops firing down the board like this against the king side. So that's another kind of plan of idea that I could store in my brain and then decide whether I like that more than Kasparov's f4, e5. After castles and knight a4 to attack the queen, queen to c7. Now you get f4 anyway. So yeah, it's still very aggressive and it's a very interesting plan of action. You know, you could potentially rook lift this way and you've got the queen coming over. So this is also really nice. But actually, I think I prefer Kasparov's idea. It seems to be a bit more direct and takes less moves to enact. I want to play aggressively and try and take the initiative as quickly as I can. So that would be a better option for me. let's close this game. Let's get rid of the move bishop c4. As you can see here, it's actually currently the main move in our variation tree. So let's promote this variation like this, and then let's delete this one. I'm going to stick with the move bishop g5, and the game Kasparov-Ivanchuk will be my stem game. So let's cite that into the game. But even more than that, let's actually open this game again. Using the 3 lines menu here on the game analysis, which is a public analysis page for this game, I can actually add this into my study via the function here. Select my study, and it comes up as a second chapter underneath my index. And what I'm going to do is actually copy the URL to this study. So remember, if I scroll down, I've got the share tab. I'm going to copy the current chapter URL like this, go back to my index, and against this citation of the game, bishop g5, I'm going to go to the comments tab and just add my link to my chapter in there. And that means that whenever I go through my index, when I hit this move, bishop g5, I now know that I can either look at the game directly, or I can go to it via the link here, like so, and you see it switched over to the second chapter. So a benefit of doing this means that I can now add comments, I can now look at different variations and save them against this game in this chapter, which you can't do in the public analysis page for each game. And I can also rename this, and I can use this as the stem game for the classical Sicilian. So classical Sicilian, and then I just want to have the kind of surnames of the players like this, and I also want to put the year in as well. So I know that this is the game that I'm going to base my play on, and that can become my chapter about the classical Sicilian. I've done that for a few of the other main lines. I haven't done all of them, so I just wanted to show this as an example. But you can see in my notation there's a lot more links, there's a lot more game citations in there. I've tried to add the citation after my chosen move as white. So for example, let's look at this line here in the Sveshnikov. After this move, d6, bishop g5, a6, knight a3, b5, knight d5 was the choice that I went for, as opposed to taking on here directly. And this was a game that I looked at between Dominguez Perez and Carlsen from St. Louis in 2019. And it's after white's move, my choice, I've now got the citation, and I can go to the chapter in my Lichess study to go and continue looking at this game further from this point here. So that's the same for all the other chapters that I've put in. Look at it after your choice with the white move, continue your analysis outside of the index, and build your understanding of your opening through these stem games. I just wanted to demonstrate some of the other features that we looked at in the 3 lines menu at the start. So these visual motifs here, if I click these all on, I'll see undefended pieces, pinned pieces, and a checkable king using these kind of graphics on the board. I can easily see that this pawn is hanging, this knight is pinned currently to the queen over here, like this. I've got a checkable king either by knight takes f6 check or knight c7 check, and the white king is also checkable with the move queen to a5. So this just helps me to instantly understand this position a little bit better in terms of what's going on. Yeah, the pawn may not actually be hanging because of the pin on the knight, but it still shows it up as a hanging piece like so. This game is also a great example of studying endgames. Let's just turn off these visual motifs and then go to the end. Black resigned after the move king to b3. This is very clearly an endgame. If we turn on the book icon here, now we get access to the table base as opposed to the opening explorer. So these are kind of known endgame positions, and it shows who is winning, losing, or whether it's a draw. With black to move, it is losing. Here are all the moves, as you can see. If we flick back one move, now it's white to move, and it shows that it's clearly winning for white. Although there are some mistakes that you could play, like this or this, that would then lose the game. So you can study endgames that way using the table base and the other tools we've looked at, like the engine, etc. One thing that I've noticed now is that our notation tree is starting to look a little bit messy. So let's just play around with some of the tools to tidy it up to see if that makes a difference. Let's go to the disclosure buttons tool and turn that on, and let's take a look. And let's just minimize what we can, like so and like so. And now actually you can see that we've just got our clear main line. It's much, much easier to look at. And when we get to a move with a plus icon, we can expand this and look at everything underneath it. We could go even further. Let's minimize this one, for example. I think that's the only other one that exists there at the moment. So this is now a minimized view of this notation, and I can expand and collapse these sections as I wish. Let's just go and turn this to inline notation as well to see what difference that makes. Yeah, so that doesn't make that much of a difference. It does neaten it a bit with all of the lines collapsed, but I can continue to expand out that way. I think I prefer the vertical notation, so let's just turn that one back like that. It's also worth pointing out that if I've got all of my expandable selections open like this, I can easily shut them all by right-clicking on a move and going collapse all, and I could open them again doing the same thing with expand all. Regarding this variation opacity slider, I'm at a point in the game where there are various options for black to play, and at the moment this is all the way down, so it's not showing any arrows. But as I slide this, you can see that it shows the options as arrows on the board, and they get more and more opaque, but I tend to just leave these ones off. Now we know more about our opening, let's check that everything is sound. We can use the engine to find any errors before trying these lines in actual play. Let's turn the engine on using the toggle here, and we can configure it using this settings cog. I can choose which engine I want to use. I tend to just use the default option, but you can play around with the other ones. Then you can set the search time, anywhere from 2 seconds to an infinite search time. I can then select how many lines of analysis I want to see, anywhere from 0 to 5. I tend to stick with 5 because it shows me the different options available in a position and whether one move is clearly better than another. And you can set the threads and the memory. Here we see our 5 lines of analysis, and let's use our classical Sicilian example again. So after e4, c5, knight f3, we want to choose the move knight c6. We can either expand the section using the plus icon like this, or we can make the move or select it from here and it will do it for us. Then move d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, and here we looked at when black plays the move d6. And we had a choice between 2 moves before, bishop g5 and bishop c4, and using the games database we chose a game from Kasparov, and that gave us our move bishop g5, and the engine evaluation backs up that choice. So even though bishop c4 is the top move listed, bishop g5 is second, the evaluation between the two of them is exactly the same. So this confirms our choice, and we can happily put bishop g5 on the board as guided by both Kasparov and the Silicon master. Now, let's suppose our analysis has a mistake. I'll turn the engine off for a second and go to this move here, where after the dragon variation, I chose the move queen to d2 after the game Carlsen-Rajabov 2008. But let's just say instead I looked at a game where the move h4 had been played. Let's use the engine to see if this is correct. We go back to the move g6 from black, which starts the dragon, and turn on the engine. Well, here you can see after the moves bishop e3, bishop g7, f3 and castles, both players are playing a theoretical line and an engine approved line. Then we put the move h4 on the board, and you can see the evaluation changes from plus 0.5 down to minus 0.3. So this is an error. It could be classed as a dubious move because there is a plan or idea behind it, which is to push the pawn up the board and attack this fianchettoed king's position. And if that's your plan or idea, then you might necessarily not want to follow the engine and just go for what you like. But in this case, I think this is a big enough swing to class this as a mistake. So we adjust our study, we'll go back a move. The top engine move is queen d2. This is confirmed by the master's database, so that would be our choice. And if I hadn't already found a game with that move, I'd then go look at the games database to find one and try and use that as my stem game. And we'll delete the move h4 from our study. We've done the hard work, and it's time to play some chess. No matter the result, we can use the analysis to inform and improve our study, and in turn use the study to inform and improve our play. Let's take a look at this in action. I just played this game in the Sicilian defense as white, which I lost. So now let's use the analysis to update our opening study and improve our opening play. By going to the analysis board, and this is just the main analysis board that you get after any game on Lichess, it's not in my study or anything. Let's take a look at the opening. So after e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, and a6, we enter the Najdorf variation, the main line Sicilian that you will face. And here I played the move bishop to g5, so similar to what we looked at against the classical Sicilian. And after the moves e6, queen d2, bishop e7, long castles, queen c7, and f4, I do play that exact plan that we looked at from Kasparov, but that was in a different variation. That was the classical, not the Najdorf. So let's compare this to our opening study. We follow the main line again, all the way to a6, where we get the Najdorf. And here, actually, I chose to play the move bishop to e3 when I was analysing this and looking at game examples. I remember now the reason was because after bishop to g5, you had, queen b6 and the poison pawn variation. I want to avoid that because that's probably what Najdorf players really want, and it gets pretty complicated. So I chose to play bishop e3, and then we looked at the main move e5 and knight to b3 as my kind of main line in this. And if I just expand this here, I can see that I've got a game. Well, it's another Kasparov-Ivanchuk game from the same year, 1998. I can go and have a look at that and just remind myself how that game went. So here, and we have this kind of pawn chain created, and the move g4, that was the main idea. I'd forgotten that when I played my actual game. I reinforced my knowledge, and hopefully the next time I play against the Najdorf, I will remember this and go and actually play it. I don't need to update my actual study because I played the wrong move on move 6, and I've seen that now and can make my adjustments. Something else I could do to help me remember this in future is from my index chapter, where I've got the game cited as my stem game for the Najdorf. I can now go to the link where I can find that chapter in my study. Here it is, chapter 2, the Najdorf. I could have also just selected it from here. If we go to the move 6, bishop e3, I can go to the comment box and make a comment like this. I could say something like, here in a game, I played bishop g5, this was wrong, remember the plan, bishop e3, f3, and g4. Let's say that I had played the right move on move 6 and played bishop e3, and it was my opponent who had deviated from the lines I've already looked at and from the stem game that I'm studying. So instead of the move e5, maybe they play, say, b5. Let's say I continue with bishop d3, and then after bishop to b7, I played f3, for example. First, let's check if b5 is actually a move. So let's go to the games database here, and we can see that it's quite far down the list, but it is on the list. And if we look at the games played after the move b5, well, Nakamura's played it, for example. So, it's something that we might face again in the future. We definitely want to analyze it and learn how to better play against it than we may have potentially played in this game. Our move was bishop to d3, and that is down here on the move list with 2% and only one game played, which was a win for black. So maybe it wasn't the best. Let's have a look at the engine. Yep, the move bishop d3 doesn't show up in the top 5 moves, so our move was potentially a mistake, like so. Let's just check that. Well, the evaluation isn't that bad, so actually I'd probably give this more of a dubious move than a mistake. It's, not the worst, but it's also not the best. In future, I might want to consider one of the top engine moves, so knight d5, for example, or maybe even a4. And actually, a4 is the top move played by the masters in this position. So that looks good because I know that after b5, it creates a hook against this pawn structure. So a4 might be my choice here. I might even promote this variation and then delete these extra moves. And against bishop d3, say this was what I played in this game. Next time play a4, and here make a comment such as like, in this position you want to crack at black's light square pawn structure on the queen side by playing this move. The Lichess study we've created can grow with us as we play chess into the future. And if we play this opening consistently, it could become a real weapon in our hands. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this useful. Let me know which openings you'd like to study in the comments below, and consider a like or subscribe to the channel if you'd like to follow this journey. Otherwise, I will see you next time.